Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, episode number 16. Jamie Eads joining you as always. Thanks so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. We got a great episode today. We have an hour-long conversation with Liberty DeVitto. Liberty's new band is the Lords of 52nd Street, along with the longtime rhythm section from Billy Joel's band of 29 and a half years. That's where you know Liberty from, most likely. So we're going to be joined by him here in just a second, so please stay tuned. Los Cabos drumsticks may be the best kept secret from drummers today. Los Cabos drumsticks makes the finest tools to touch a drummer's hands in the business. The best news, almost every popular stick size is available in both white hickory and red hickory. If you don't know what red hickory is, it's made from the heartwood of the hickory tree, unlike regular white hickory, which is made from sapwood. Red hickory drumsticks will hold up to even the hardest hitting drummers. Their durability comes from the density of the wood, but they do not sacrifice the feel. Please visit LosCabosDrumsticks.com to learn more about their products. And don't forget to ask at your favorite retailer for Los Cabos drumsticks. All right, guys, we're absolutely delighted to be joined today by Liberty DeVitto. You will hear me reference to this, but Liberty played on all those classic Billy Joel records, selling over 150 million copies. So Liberty certainly knows a thing or two about playing drums for a songwriter. His nickname is actually the Songwriter's Drummer. We really don't need to introduce him. He's just such a great guy, a true historian of music, and we just had just a fantastic conversation. So I hope you'll enjoy it. We're pleased to be joined by Liberty DeVitto. Good evening, Liberty. How are you today?
I'm very, very good. I mean, spring is here in New York City.
Well, you know, it took a little while for spring to arrive down here in the Bluegrass State, but we're finally starting to get a little bit of warmth and the rain has gone away. So, we're lucky. We're lucky, right?
I think the calendar is shifting. I think, eventually we're going to be like Australia is, you know, where they have Christmas in the summertime.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've noticed, but even Christmas has been like really warm.
Yeah.
You know, and it did take time for spring to hit.
It did indeed. And, you know, Mother Nature has a mind of her own. So, we're all just passengers on this third rock from the sun, right? Exactly.
We just ride this big ball and who knows where it'll take us.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Lib, we really do appreciate you taking the time to come on the Drum Shuffle. I am absolutely honored to be talking to you tonight. I have been just such a big fan of your playing for years and years. And, you're welcome. You picked up a nickname over the years, the Songwriter's Drummer. And,
right.
I have always said, I don't have every chop in the world in my arsenal, so I want to play for the song. That's what I try to do as a drummer. And, I have emulated your stuff for many, many years. So if you're okay with it, let's go back to the beginning. Obviously you're a New York guy, and it's my understanding that the Beatles, like so many guys of your generation, the Beatles changed your life, right?
Well, yes, they did, but we got to go back even earlier than that.
Okay.
It's funny because I don't know why I started with the drums. My parents bought me drums, and later on in life, I asked my dad, "Why did you get me drums?" And he said, "Because they didn't make Prozac when you were a kid."
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I never knew why I started the drums. I always loved music. I bought 45s. The first 45 I ever bought was a song called Book of Love by the Monotones. And I used to mow lawns when I was a kid. And you'd get like $2 to mow a lawn, maybe $4 if it was a corner house. And I used to go right to the record store and buy 45s. And, I loved music all the time, and I'd sing along with these records and stuff like that. And then when I got the drum set, I would try to play to them. And I was in 6th grade at the time, and so they put me in the 6th grade school band. And the first thing the teacher wanted me to do was the buzz roll through the entire Star Spangled Banner. And I couldn't do it. And he said, "Put the sticks down, DeVitto. You'll never do anything with the drums."
Oh, well.
Just because I couldn't do that buzz roll.
Famous last words, right?
Yeah. So I got very discouraged about that. I still always loved music. The drums were in my room and stuff like that. And then but life went on, and I get into junior high school, and I'm walking around junior high school in the 8th grade, and it's like I'm seeing these other beings called girls, and I really want to meet them. But the girls in my high school, they liked all the guys that played sports. Yeah. And I tried playing baseball, but I swear the ball was coming to me, and it landed like about 20 feet away from me. That's when I found out I had to wear glasses. So here I am in school with these, in the early 60s, it's like Coke bottle glasses,
Yeah.
And I don't play sports. And so how am I going to meet girls? That's when February 64, there they were in black and white on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Beatles.
Yeah, and the girls reacted to those guys, right? I mean,
this is how I say it. I say that there I was looking at the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I noticed that when the camera panned off the Beatles and onto the crowd, all these girls were screaming, standing on the seats, screaming at these not that good-looking guys. And then I looked at my sister and her friends in the room with me, and they're screaming at a black and white TV at these not that good-looking guys. And I thought, okay, forget the buzz roll. That's what I want to do. And I got serious,
Sure. Well, now, in your early years, you had drums. Did you take lessons from guys there in Brooklyn, or were you self-taught?
First of all, I'm living on Long Island by now because
okay.
My father was a New York City policeman. He worked in Brooklyn, so he moved us out of Brooklyn. It was getting rough in the 60s and 70s or something like that. But anyway, so after I see the Beatles, I'm thinking, okay, I can play the drums. I want to do what that guy does. So my mother sent me for lessons again at a local store. And the guy was teaching me jazz. And I said, when are you going to teach me how to play like Ringo? And he said, what do you want to learn to play like Ringo for? He stinks. And I was like, well, I saw all these girls screaming for him last night, and I don't see anybody beating down your door today, and it's like, so that was the end of my lessons right there. I knew he wasn't going to teach me. And back then, in 64, guys, they were really holding on to jazz and big band, and they didn't think the Beatles they thought they would be a flash in the pan. They were going to be here today and gone tomorrow.
Right.
They didn't realize that they were going to change the world of music, not once, but twice. First with the Fab Four, that Beatle, She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand Beatles. And then the second time when they put on those silly costumes and were called the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Well, amen to that. Yeah.
So how many groups that spawned off of that? So, in the beginning, you had the Day Clock 5 and the Kinks and the Rolling Stones and all those bands that came after the Beatles. And then when the Sgt. Peppers came out, you had Deep Purple and Pink Floyd and all those bands that came, So these guys that were giving lessons at the time didn't want to know about this rock and roll stuff. They thought it was going to be gone immediately. So I had to teach myself. I am self-taught, and the benefit of being self-taught is when you're playing to a record, records became my books, and when you're playing to a record, you kind of wonder where you are in the song because you can't read music, you can't write out a chart or anything like that. So the thing I had to do was learn the lyrics to the song.
Right.
So I would sing along with it to know where I am, And I would realize as I'm singing along, hey, the drummer does his drum fill when the singer stops singing, or when they go into a more exciting part, like the bridge or the chorus. And I continued taking that with me through my entire career, that whole idea. And I guess that's how, like myself and Larry Mullen and Kenny Aronoff and yourself, and, you see the words to a song and you see the picture that they're trying to paint, and then you add more color with your drums.
Well, for sure. And, I think that's a real interesting point in that, the guys like you and I that are self-taught, that try to play for the song, we're really arrangers instead of anything else. It's you learn the arrangement of a song and you adapt your playing to those arrangements, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. And because you're creating something that wasn't there before. And, like with Billy Joel, Billy could come in with any song that he wrote, sit behind the piano, just him and the piano, and after he's done playing, you'd say, that's a great song.
Well, sure.
And as a drummer, you would say, that's a great song, I want to be on it.
Right.
How can I get on that song and make it even a little better?
Right. Well, and, I think folks, know a lot of that Billy Joel story. And of course, it goes, I'm going to say it. I was about to say it goes without saying, but, you drummed on albums that have sold over 150 million copies. So, it's fair to say you're a fairly well-heard drummer, right? But
yeah.
Yes, but you and Billy actually met when you guys were kids. Now, you didn't actually get in the band until, I guess, the Turnstiles album, which was mid-'70s, but you and Billy had crossed paths when you guys were teenagers, right?
Yeah, in 1967. He was in a band called the Hassles. I was in a band called the New Rock Workshop, and we both played in the same club. As a matter of fact, there's sometimes I see it show up on Facebook. A guy has a announcement kind of thing where it says, appearing tonight at the My House was the name of the club. At the My House, the Hassles and the New Rock Workshop together. So we used to pass each other in the dark and just say hi, like it was that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then, then it wasn't until 74, the end of 74, that I actually, got with him.
So I'm assuming then he had already done like Piano Man and presumably used just studio guys on that record, right?
Right. Ron Tutt was the drummer.
Okay.
Elvis's drummer.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's probably not a bad way to go, right?
No, it's a great way to go.
Well, so when you joined the band, I think it's safe to say for anybody that knows Billy's music, things started getting, I guess, more adventurous in the arrangements and things like that. And this is something that I've always wanted to know. One of those seminal songs, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. Okay. Right. It's just one of the epic tracks from that era. I've always wanted to know, was that all one take for you on the drums?
We were playing that song live before we went in the studio to do it. We were playing that song at the end of the Turnstiles tour. But in the beginning, we were only playing the Brenda and Eddie part.
Okay.
And then he came in, he came up with the whole Scenes from an Italian Restaurant thing. And I know that when Phil Ramone came to see us, we were playing it because when we went in the studio to record it, we actually did maybe 2 takes of it.
Wow.
And it is exactly the same way on that record as it was when Phil Ramone heard it.
Wow.
And he even said, I knew when not to mess with greatness,
Well, the arrangement of that song, there's just, all those different parts and, the swell, back into kind of the slow section at the end.
Right.
It's just, It really is epic. I mean, that's the word that I keep using, but I had always wondered if that was, studio magic that later got adapted to the live show, or if you guys just went in and cut it the way it is. And
no, that one we cut the way it is. I'll tell you which one we put together, though, was Angry the Man was put together.
Okay.
It started in the beginning with the quick piano thing. Then we did the middle part, and then the end.
Well, when a guy like Billy Joel comes in with a song like that, and as you said, I want to be on it and see if I can, add something to the mix, to the stew, if you will.
Right.
I mean, what are you thinking as a drummer when you hear kind of this epic song, that's going to be, 5-6 minutes, and all those different parts? Do you just go in and start woodshedding on it, or do you have an idea of, well, I think I know how I can bring it from the A section to the B section? Tell us a little bit about that kind of process in his songs.
Well, we, it was great. Having the band that we had, especially the ones that are on Glass Houses. We had a band called Topper before we got with Billy's,
Sure.
So me and the bass player had been playing together. Doug Stegmeyer had been playing together for a while already. So we could almost read each other's minds, and so when Billy would come in with something, we would have different grooves that we were playing, different feels that we were playing, so we could take Billy somewhere where he would never expect us to go, to add to the songs.
Sure. So there was already some chemistry in the band. It wasn't just like, all you guys thrown together and let's see what happens. There was history there. So that's always
exactly.
good. Yeah.
There was history there, so it was easy to reference other things. Like when we did Say Goodbye to Hollywood, it was easy to reference the Ronettes and Hal Blaine and that whole thing. I want that kind of feel, Hal Blaine. Yeah, okay, I'll give you Hal Blaine, but it's going to be Lib and DeVitto being Hal Blaine.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's that kind of thing. A lot of referencing going on.
Sure. Well, and, all of those albums are just, they're timeless. They're great. I think, everybody in the band just played so wonderfully well. And, I had the great fortune of seeing you guys. I want to say it was, mid to late 90s. It was the first time I'd ever gone to a Billy Joel show. And man, it was incredible. I mean, everybody in the band was just an A player, right. And that's really rare. I mean, I think, especially if it's not just kind of one of those manufactured things, if that makes sense. I mean, I could tell that you guys were a true band in every sense of the word, and everybody was having so much fun,
Well, the band that plays on the earlier records, like the band I'm talking about now is like Russell Javers, Doug Stegmeyer, Richie Cannata, and David Brown was in the band also. We really, really respected. We loved the Beatles, first of all, and we used to get deep into listening to the Beatles, and if you compare John Lennon to let's say Joe Satriani, you would say John Lennon stinks, compared to Joe Satriani. But in the Beatles, John Lennon's part was so important to the construction of those songs, and that's what Billy's band did for Billy. Billy was Billy. Billy was the star. He was the piano player, vocalist. Richie Cannata, the sax player, was the soloist on top of all that stuff.
Right.
We were the foundation, and we had our parts that we played to fit what was going on top of it. So we kind of figured that out. I mean, it's really weird to think about it now and talk about it, because back in the day it was like, oh, we're just a bunch of guys in the studio, a bunch of friends having fun.
Right. At the time, you don't realize how awesome it really is. I'm guilty of that too. And then you get removed from one of those records, 10, 15, 20 years, and you listen back to it. And, I don't know if you're like me, but I'll be critical of my playing and say, gosh, I wish I'd have done that differently. But then when you think of it in terms of the whole song, you say, oh, that actually works really well. And we were firing on all cylinders there.
Yeah, one song in particular was the song My Life that we did. Every time I hear that song on the radio, I'm like, oh, God, I can't stand what I'm playing. But that was a gold single,
Well, and wasn't that the theme song to the Tom Hanks show?
Yeah, but somebody recut it.
Oh, okay.
So they wouldn't have to play. They wouldn't have to pay for the master.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. Let's screw the artist out of the royalties. That's
right.
That's just the common thing. Well, here's something that a lot of folks may not know about Liberty DeVitto. You played drums on Meatloaf's "Bat Out of Hell," right?
No, the next album.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, the next album. I played on two tunes. One was called Rock and Roll and Brew, and I can't remember what the other one was called, but yeah, it was great. That was the first time I met Davy Johnstone and a bunch of the other guys, and we really rocked Meatloaf. I mean, it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I didn't know that, and I, doing a little bit of research before this, I saw that credit and I was like, wow, I had no idea. But, I guess it's kind of similar in the fact that it's piano driven music, but it's completely an opposite genre, I guess, so that's just a really cool credit to have on the resume, right?
Oh, it's very cool credit. I mean, that next to doing 2 tracks with Paul McCartney and just going in the studio with Steve Winwood played on the Bridge album. He played on a song called Getting Closer. That was like, I grew up listening to Steve Winwood. Somebody wrote in my yearbook when I graduated high school, they said, keep your head and one day you'll play with Steve Winwood. It's like I showed it to him.
Wow. That's, sometimes there's divine intervention in things that we don't see, I'm
telling you, it's unbelievable.
That's a really cool story. Well, Lib, I don't mean to jump around so much, but I mean, it goes, we all know you played with Billy for what, 30 years, something like that?
Yeah. If not 30, 29 and a half.
Okay. Well, 29 and a half years. I mean, you guys toured the world countless times, as I said already, sold 150 million records. That's a career to die for, but you're still out there doing it. And I want to talk about, Lords of 52nd Street. What a band. And that's kind of, that's you and Richie and Russell, right?
Yes. Yep. Me, Richie, and Russell.
So tell us a little bit about the Lords of 52nd Street. Was that just kind of a, hey, we should really keep playing together, or was there more behind it than just the thought of, we have something special, let's keep it going?
Well, what happened was we got inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame. Me, Russell, Richie, and Doug Stegmeyer, who's since left this world, and we miss him greatly. But we got inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame, and they told us that we could play one song.
No, of course.
We went to play one song. We ended up playing 5 because the crowd was going crazy. So what we had to talk the next day. It was like, a lot of people that are in tribute bands playing our material are making a lot of money,
Yeah.
Not only did we love to play the songs and love being together again, because we hadn't been together in so long, and then to think that, and we could even make a little money at this,
Sure.
So, yeah, but playing the tunes, getting back on that horse again was very interesting, because we have a guy, of course you need somebody to fill the shoes of Billy, And for the longest time, when people used to be in tribute bands and they used to write to me or send me an email and say, I'm in a tribute band and we do old Billy Joel songs and we would love to have you play with us, I would always write back, I would write back, I played with the real guy. Why would I want to play with you?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Because, you know, I was bitter about what these guys were doing. They're out playing our songs and, you know, they're acting like they're us almost, you know. It's really weird. And we're still alive. We're not dead yet. What are you guys doing? And so now we got this guy, Dave Clark, not the guy from the Dave Clark 5, but Dave Clark, who sounds like Billy but adds his own thing to it.
Sure.
And so we've always had fun. Me, Russell, and Richie always had fun. Jokes, backstage, everything. And we're still doing the same thing. It's still that much fun. We laugh all the time. It's just great. And to see the people react after all these years, you know, you realize, I'm sitting behind the drums and I realized, wow, they really did. This was a soundtrack to their life. It's like the Beatles to me, you know?
Yeah. Well,
so it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, and when you grow up with a band, you know, or an artist, you know, however you want to look at it, you know, I mean, I've always looked at albums as, you know, kind of a Polaroid, you know, it's a snapshot in time, you know, it's what's going on today. But those things just, they become part of the fabric of your memories, you know? So sure. I mean, I get where you're going with that. And, you know, you guys you have tour dates, you know, this year. Yeah. You know, I know that there has been some recordings. You know, is this something that you see going on for the long term with those guys? I sure hope so.
Well, the way I feel about it is, as long as Billy's relevant, we're relevant. You know, I mean, like I don't know if you saw the documentary Hired Gun.
Oh yeah, that's my next question. So,
but in Hired Gun, when I say if Billy's the father of those tunes, then at least I'm the uncle. You know, because that's the way we feel. We had a relationship. You know, you look at the back cover of the albums or for credits, and it just says all songs written by Billy Joel, words and music by Billy Joel. It never says arranged by, because we all did that.
Right. Well, and, you know, I mean, I think a lot of folks don't realize how those things work. You know, I mean, certainly the folks that listen to my show are going to have, you know, a basic understanding, because this show is kind of geared towards drummers, you know, and, you know, as drummers, yeah, we may not have written the guitar riff or the lyrics, but there is something that drummers add to the song that, you know, sometimes just the business decision is, well, the song was written by the singer or the guitar player or the piano player or whatever the case may be, or song written by Lennon and McCartney, you know, to go back to the Beatles thing. But you can't take away what a rhythm section brings to that song, even after it's written. You know, nobody has ever said to me, you know, no, you know, don't put that fill there. Well, maybe they have said that to me, but you know, it's nobody has ever said, I want you to play this song exactly like this on this song. You know, I want you to play this exact drum beat or, you know, whatever the case may be. But it sounds like the business decision was made in Billy's band, at least, that he was going to be the writer, and the royalties, you know, in your case, you would only be paid mechanical royalties, not publishing. And there's a huge dichotomy in those checks. And I think a lot of people just think, well, you know, Liberty's out on the road, they're selling millions of records, he must be a bazillionaire just like Billy. And that's not how that works.
No, that's definitely not how that works. Billy was signed to Columbia before we even got in the band. And the tricky part was that we were always led to believe that we were a band. It was the way we acted, the way we went into the studio and recorded together and traveled together and did so much together there was no line between Billy and the band.
Right.
You know? But then after a while, when different lawyers came in, and all of a sudden, you know, you're sitting there and nobody it relates to the records anymore, you know, except you.
Right.
You know, that's when it got weird. You know, when the lawyers would tell Billy, you know, your name's on the marquee. Why are you paying these guys, you know, so much money, or stuff like that? You know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah, but you're right about. I believe that a band is only as good as the drummer. That's what I feel.
That's a fact.
And if somebody disagrees with me, then they probably play bass or they're a lead singer or something like that. But anyway, I believe that a band is only as good as the drummer. Like, take, for example, John Lennon wrote a great song called A Day in the Life, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's got these really crazy lyrics, crazy chords. Him and Paul come up with this crazy chords. But Ringo's drum part is almost like a second vocal, because he's answering John after he says every line with some kind of fill that is total Ringo.
Yep.
You know, but he didn't get published in. He just got, you know, because he was in the Beatles, he just got part of the group money, you know?
Right. Exactly. Well, and I mean, you know, guys like Keith Moon, for example, you know, I mean, if you listen to any of the classic Who stuff, Keith Moon played drums right along with Roger Daltrey's vocal lines. I mean,
Keith was the lead in that. You know, usually a band has a lead guitar player. No, Keith was the lead.
Yes.
He played around everybody else. You're exactly right.
You know, and, you know, that stuff, you know, and I think about, you know, the band, Levon Helm, you know, I mean, a singing drummer, you know, he plays the drums differently than anybody else on earth could. And it's not something that you can learn. You either have it or you don't.
Right.
You know, so yeah, a band is only as good as its drummer. There's no doubt about it. Now, you mentioned the documentary Hired Gun, which, you know, I'm going to address my listeners here and say, if you have not seen this movie, don't waste any time. Go find Hired Gun, the documentary. It is a fantastic movie that gives you, you know, it's sort of an inside look at guys like our guest today, Liberty, you know, who, you know, play in these, you know, kind of singer-songwriter bands, or, you know, we just had the conversation, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction from this year. You know, they just aired that on HBO the other day.
Right.
You know, Bon Jovi had 2 bass players that were inducted along with the band, and Hugh McDonald being one of them. He has never appeared on an album cover. He has never been listed, you know, He's never been on any of the concert posters. He's a hired gun, kind of that sideman role. But in the movie, Lib, you know, I know that was, you know, shot after you had left Billy's band. And, you know, I don't want to rehash, you know, any ill feelings between you and Billy for sure. But, you know, after I watched the movie, the end credits are rolling. I looked over at my wife, Lisa, and I said, man, Billy Joel must just be a dick. I mean, you know, and I know there's 2 sides to every story, but it was like, my God, how could you do that to your guy? You know, so.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's like some of the reviewers actually said that this movie shouldn't have been called Hired Gun. It should be called Billy Joel should but no, you know, the thing that's great about that documentary is when you see other documentaries like The Wrecking Crew, it's about how much fun they had and the parts they came up with for the Beach Boys or the Monkees and all the stuff that they were doing, and this is where we recorded that, and this is where we recorded that, or 25 Feet from Stardom.
Another great movie, yeah.
Another great movie, but it's the background singers, you know, and this is how we did this, and this is how we did. Hired Gun gets dark in places.
It does.
You know, when it talks about the death of, you know, Doug Stegmeyer could not deal with the fact that somebody else was on stage making money playing the parts that he created. Yeah. He could not deal with that, and he took his own life because of it. And and when Rudy Sarzo talks about Randy Rhoads going for a ride in an airplane, and then all of a sudden that's the end. They crash into the bus,
Yeah.
And it gets dark. One of my favorite lines is when Rob Zombie is talking about how a band was together and they got a great sound, and the guitar player leaves, and you have to replace the guitar player. Well, there's probably 1,000 guys out there that can play the licks that the guitar player played, but how many guys look good on stage? That brings it down to about 20 guys out of 1,000. And then he gets to the end and he goes, and how many guys can you hang with on a bus for 24 hours?
Yeah.
That brings it down to maybe one guy,
Well, Lib, you said a mouthful there. I mean, we have covered this, ad nauseum on my program. It's not necessarily, you can go to LA right now and throw a rock from anywhere in LA and hit a guitar player that can play all the scales and all the chords and can play faster than anybody else. It only takes a 20-second cursory search on Google to find an 8-year-old kid that can outdrum me and you put together, right? I mean, it's not hard to find blazing players in this day and age.
No, they're out there. Yeah.
It's all about the hang. It's not about the musicianship. You have to be a good human being to make it in this business. That's all there is to it. Because nobody wants to hang out with a guy that's not fun to be around. Like you said, you're on a bus 22 hours a day, and the other 2 hours of the day, you're on stage together.
Exactly. You're with your bandmates more than you are with your wife or girlfriend. Music is your mistress,
Well, to a non-musician, and I've said this, and I don't know if I stole this line from somebody or if I came up with it myself, but, I've said it's like being married to 4 or 5 other guys,
Yes, exactly.
And, if any one piece of that puzzle isn't right, it doesn't work,
Exactly.
And then you have to go find a replacement. And that's where it gets hard. And that's where, kind of that hired gun mentality comes in. I think Alice Cooper had, quite possibly the best line in the whole movie. He said, "I only get A players because I don't have time for B players."
Right. He's absolutely right. It's funny because a lot of people, Billy has another drummer now that plays the parts, and I get people all the time, "Oh, he's not as good as you are." No, it's not that he's not as good as I am. I made those parts up. Those parts have my personality stamped all over them.
Right.
That guy is not me. He will never sound like me.
Right.
So, when you lose the player, you lose that personality.
You absolutely do, and I mentioned Keith Moon earlier. I've been in bands that have tried to cover Who songs. When you play in a cover band, people say, "Hey, do you know anything by the Who?" I can't play like Keith Moon. Nobody can play like Keith Moon.
No.
And nobody can play like Liberty DeVitto. I've tried to cover your drum parts over the years. It's not easy to do because it's kind of that confluence of hard driving rock. There's the jazz influences. There's the Latin influences in your playing, and it's very unique and it's hard to do.
There's a lot of years of learning how to play different things pulled into one thing.
Absolutely. Well, let me switch gears just a little bit, if you don't mind. Obviously, I know Ringo was an influence on you. Who were some of your guys coming up, even into your professional career? Who are the other drummers that you go, wow?
Well, the one guy that blew Ringo off the drum stool for a while was Dino Danelli, who was in the Young Rascals.
Oh, yeah.
I, first of all, for two reasons. One, because of the way he played. He was just a tremendous player. He drove that band. You know, they were only an organ, guitar, and drums. And he really drove that band. And I had met them when I was 16 years old. You know, so here you are meeting these guys that are your idols. And the thought that I had about rock stars was so different when I met the Rascals, because when I talked to them, they were like, I was talking to my cousins at a dinner table, you know? And it was actually the first time that I realized, wow, you don't have to be insane, or you don't have to be messed up, and you don't have to get high and get drunk and do drugs and anything like that to make it in this business. You can be a normal person and you know, be talented and make it in this business. And they were so nice to me that I take that with me still till today, that I will be nice to anybody I meet, because that kid might be the next Ringo or the next Dino or the next Lib and DeVitto or whatever. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, you know, Dino was a great influence on me. Then there was other guys. One guy in particular was Jim Capaldi. He was in Traffic with Steve Winwood.
Sure.
And if you listen to Billy songs, like a song, The Stiletto or The Stranger, it has that 16 note on the hi-hat feel.
Yeah.
Which comes from Traffic, because Billy was a big Traffic fan too. So, you know, he was a big influence on my playing. And, you know, going on with Mitch Mitchell and Ginger Baker, they were great. And then, you know, move up to Steve Gadd was always a great influence. And, you know, one of my biggest disappointments in life was when I found out that Hal Blaine was like 6 of my favorite drummers, you know.
Well, touche. That's that you bring up a good point there. You know, I mean, you were in the movie with the guy, you know, of my generation that is like 6 of my favorite drummers, and that's Kenny Aronoff. You know, I mean, you could go just put on a blindfold in a record store and pull out a CD, and you've got about a 20% shot that he played the drums on it.
Right.
The guy's just everywhere, which is awesome. It sounds like you have a very eclectic list of influences. I don't know a drummer alive that doesn't name Steve Gadd, you know.
Right.
And I'm sure you've met Steve many times, you know, being in New York. You know, what's it like meeting a guy like Steve Gadd? What do you say to a guy like Steve Gadd? You know?
Well, the first time I met Steve when we were doing the Stranger album, because Phil Ramone was producing, you know, working with Paul Simon and a bunch of other people, and he was always using Gadd. As a matter of fact, when we did a song called Get It Right the First Time, it's on the Stranger album, it kind of has that, that's me trying to be Steve Gadd. And I remember we would come in the studio, record Moving Out, and then try Get It Right the First Time. Couldn't get it. Record another song on the Stranger album, and then try Get It Right the First Time. Couldn't get it. And finally I said to Phil, why don't you get the guys from Stuff, that was the band that Steve was in at the time, to do Get It Right the First Time? And he looked at me and he goes, no, you're going to play it. You are going to play it, you know? So that year when the Grammys came about and Just the Way You Are won Record of the Year, me and Steve were together, like hanging out. And there's a great picture of us partying hard. But yeah, that's where I first met Steve. And then, you know, I've seen him many, many times over the years. His wife, Carol, used to work for Phil. And so there's a little circle of friends that were close for a long time.
Sure. Well, I mean, both of you guys are just, monster drummers, and gosh, to have been a fly on the wall for that, I mean, I hear these stories, and that's what I think. I wish I could have just been there.
The strangest thing is, like, all these people that you knew on a record and are now like friends of yours now.
Yeah.
Like, well, the first guy that I actually really changed my life in the way he played was Carmine Appice. I was in that band, the New Rock Workshop, that played with Billy's band, the Hassles, and the Vanilla Fudge were going to come and play, and the New Rock Workshop was going to open up for them in this little club that we played in. And then somebody came up to me and said, "Did you ever see them?" And I said, "No." And they said, "They're playing at this other club, the Action House." I had fake proof at the time I could get in. I went in there, and they started playing, and Carmine played so hard and so loud with so much energy, it frightened me. It literally scared me. Yeah. And then we played the next night with them, and me and Carmine have been friends since then.
Yeah.
It's really, really, and like to have a friend like Bernard Purdy, it's like, are you kidding me? This guy, you're supposed to do him on the record all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and, I mean, this show that we're doing right now, it's fairly new. It was one of those things that I had talked about for years and years. And, my wife finally said, just do it. I mean, you've got all the gear. Just do it. Figure it out. Quit talking about it and do something with it. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be on the phone with Liberty DeVitto or, Doug Clifford from CCR, a couple of weeks back. I mean, I just never thought that was. But here's the thing about us drummers. We have such a fraternity, and it seems like drummers are just always willing to help another drummer out,
Definitely.
No matter what. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've handed my cymbal bag to somebody because they forgot theirs at home or whatever, It's like, well, here, use mine. We just, we all root for each other, which I think is just such a cool thing.
We really do. You think that you're by yourself and nobody knows who you really are, and you just do your job as a drummer. And I'm at the NAMM show, the last NAMM show, last February, and somebody says, "There's Zigaboo from the Meters." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you got to be kidding me!" So I went up to him and I said, "You Zigaboo, you've been an influence. I've got all the Meter albums and everything." He goes, "Let me tell you something, Liberty. You have raised the bar to how aggressive drummers have to play these days." I was like, "Wait a minute. You know how I play?" Are you kidding me?
See, isn't that amazing? I mean, it's just, and I'm not trying to take anything away from guitarists or singers or anything like that. But, and I've said this before, and my listeners are going to know what I'm going to say. But, when I go see another drummer play, I am absolutely stealing something from his arsenal to use always in my own. Always. But we give credit. It's like, no, that's not me. I stole that lick from Lib DeVitto, off of a Billy Joel record. Guitarists go, "No, I invented that."
Right. I always tell the story. Everybody's like, "How did you come up with the brushes and that lick in the beginning of Only the Good Die Young?" It's got that.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, well, if you listen to Jimi Hendrix, there's a song called "Up from the Skies." It starts exactly the same way, and then it does the shuffle on the brushes. Just want to talk to you, the same thing, or I had a girlfriend when we were doing a Turnstiles album, and there's a song on there called "Summer Highland Falls," and it starts with the toms. Billy sings the first verse, and then he ends it. "See the sadness, all euphoria, bam, bam," and I go boom, 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 boom. I had a girlfriend that loved Joni Mitchell at the time.
so that's a ripoff from a Joni Mitchell record?
from Help Me.
Oh, it is.
Help me out. Yeah.
Oh, I had never put that together, but that's awesome. See,
for this girl.
the things that we learn on the drum shuffle, that's just so cool, Lib.
Well, that's because you got it on shuffle, so sometimes it lands on something that you normally don't hear.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Lib, I want to be respectful of your time. We're getting close to the end of our time together, and I really do appreciate you coming on. But, one of the things that we love to do on this show, and we ask all of our guests, give us a good piece of advice for other drummers or other musicians. And it can be anything you want it to be, but, share some of the knowledge that you've picked up over your amazing career with us.
Well, the thing that I always tell young kids when they say, "What should I do to get to where you got?" Or, well, first of all, you got to continue to have fun doing what you do. There's guys. There was a point at one time in my life when I would be up on stage with Billy playing Madison Square Garden or something like that, and I was just not happy in the way the music sounded, the way some other guys in the band were acting and stuff like that, and I was just miserable. And there's guys that go and have a jam once a month in somebody's basement. They crack open a few beers, and they're having a great time. They're more successful than I was that night at Madison Square Garden because they're still having a great time. Also, this business is so difficult these days. Nothing like it was when I was with Billy. There are no A&R people anymore. If you have a band, you got to make an album that's mixed and mastered and presented to them. They don't, so you have to have the passion to do what you're doing. It's like being in love with somebody. If the passion dies, it's over. You have to keep that passion going. And that's what I think has kept me wanting to play is the passion. Just the fact that I love to do this. I just love it. And I love the exchange with the audience because they see how much I love it and then they love it too.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've experienced the same exact thing. You're playing and all of a sudden somebody comes up to you and goes, "That was great." And you're like, "Whoa.
Yeah. I
achieved what I wanted to do."
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're not, and I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but if you don't have the gifts that God gave to, Mike Portnoy or Mike Mangini or Thomas Lang or Benny Greb, which I don't have those tools, and yeah. I could practice for 1,000 hours every day and not get those chops. It's just not in the cards for me. But if you can get in a group of guys and put over the song and put it over the moon, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's what I try to do. And that's all we can do. I can't play double stroke rolls at 300 beats per minute. I just can't. And I'm never going to be able to do that. And, so you just try to get the song over. And
right. I don't like listing music with money, but just think about the big money bands. You got the Beatles. Ringo never took lessons. You got U2. Larry Mullen never took lessons. Doesn't do a drum solo. You got so many bands like that. Look at AC/DC. Come on. You don't get much bigger than that.
Right.
Phil Rudd. Come on. What does he play? Boom, da, boom, boom, da, boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what he does.
Well, and I think, I think we could have you back and do a whole hour on just that, kind of how to write drums for a song. But, I think you've hit on something there. There's nothing that I like more than to put on Sticky Fingers. Charlie, one of the greatest drummers ever, in my opinion, but he's not playing a drum solo through every song. He fits perfectly into the Stones. Ringo fit perfectly into the Beatles. I think it's just bringing your voice as a musician and putting the song over. And
I had this kind of conversation with Steve Gadd. As a matter of fact, I was like, I just play like I never did a drum solo, and I don't play like you do. And Steve said, no, you play like you do, and nobody else plays like you do.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, okay, I like that.
Absolutely. Well,
one of my favorite people that boost my confidence more than anybody else. I don't know if you know Dom Famularo. Do you know Dom Famularo?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Jeez, I mean, if you want to get your confidence boosted to a new level, you talk to Dom and say, "What do you think of my playing, Dom?" And he'll say, he always tells me, he made a comment to a kid once. He goes, "Liberty is like John Bonham. Every note that you hear Liberty play means something. Just like John Bonham, every note he played meant something." It's like that kind of thing. It's like for somebody to compare you to John Bonham, like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, that gets my attention. I mean, he Bonham was my guy. And
he was, if you ask me, he was an R&B drummer that sat behind a big rock set.
Yeah. You're right. And, it's kind of cool, but, I've researched Jeff Ochiltree, who was his tech for years. And when Jeff showed his tuning, it's jazz tuning. It was just on really big drums.
Right.
And that was part of the soup, that made them so special. Lib, one last thing before we let you go. Again, I want to be respectful of your time. We've had so much fun talking with you. I mean, it's just been an honor of a lifetime for me to have you on the show because, it's just so great. But I do want to touch on one thing that you do these days, and I want people to hear about the organization, and that is Little Kids Rock.
Little Kids Rock. Yes. Little Kids Rock was started by a school teacher. He was a math teacher in the worst part of L.A. And his name is Dave Wish. And he saw these kids just hanging out. And he thought, you know what? There's no music curriculum in the school. If I could give these kids lessons if they want, but they have to stick with it for a year. Well, he started out with 20 kids in California, and now over 500,000 kids have passed through Little Kids Rock. And it puts instruments in the hands of kids in underprivileged schools where the music curriculum has been taken out. And Dave believes that if you teach a kid one chord, he could play 25 songs. You teach him the second chord in that progression, he's up to 50 songs. You teach him that third chord in that 3-chord progression, he can play 150 songs. And you teach him what they want to know. Because eventually, when they get into music, they will go back to find out where that stuff came from. Because you meet so many musicians or ex-musicians that people say, yeah, I played the piano for a year, but, they were teaching me classical music, and I kind of lost interest in it because I was into the Beatles. So it's like, teach a kid what he knows. I'm sure you grew up playing what you know, right?
Absolutely.
Not playing Beethoven or something like that,
Right. I mean, I'm just like you. I grew up and every dollar that I had either went to drumsticks or, a cassette tape or a record that I could play along to. And, that was my school, was in my mom's basement, and I ran home from the school bus And, I would play until either I couldn't physically hold sticks anymore because my hands were bruised and bloodied.
Right.
Or, my mom said, okay, dude, you got to do some homework, before you're 30 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, I think organizations like Little Kids Rock are so important because music curriculum is leaving our schools. And, there's this big debate all the time. Is rock and roll dead? Is rock and roll ever going to make, a comeback to its golden era? And it's not going to if we don't have programs like that one. And I know that you're an honorary board member with them. So I'm going to encourage my listeners, if you got a spare buck or two, it's a fantastic organization that gets instruments into the hands of rock and roll's next generation.
Yeah, free. Yeah, free. The teachers in the schools, they teach the kids, and it's all free for them.
It's so important. So we appreciate you carrying that message out there and being involved, because how cool is it when you walk into, I don't know, PS 187 or whatever, and Lib DeVitto is there giving drum lessons to these kids after school. That's just fantastic.
The best part of it is that when you get these young kids, I mean, they're so young, they're like, 9 or 8 or something like that. And I'll go in there with Dave Wish, and Dave Wish will go, we got a special guest here today. His name is Lib and DeVitto. Can anybody guess does anybody know what band he played with? And one kid will raise his hand, and Dave will go, okay, what band did he play with? And the kid goes, the Beatles? It's the only name they know.
Man, that's fantastic. That is so funny. Oh, Lib, thank you so much for coming on our show and talking with us. It's just been a great interview. It is an open door policy here. You are now Drum Shuffle alum. So anytime you want to come back and talk about anything you got going on with the Lords, please feel free to come back anytime. You're always welcome on this program.
Thank you so much.
No problem. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you real soon, Lib.
Okay, buddy.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
All right, gang, that's going to wrap up episode number 16 of the Drum Shuffle. As always, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to whatever platform you're using to listen in today. You are not going to want to miss our upcoming guests, I promise. We continue to try to bring you the drummers that you want to hear from. Also, keep your emails coming. Our email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you throughout the week. We love answering your questions. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can always find more information on me over at jamieeads.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We can't do any of this without you. So until next time, may your heads stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers.